The ring slipped from my fingers before I even realized I had stopped breathing. It hit the wet pavement with a soft metallic sound, barely audible under the hum of traffic and distant laughter spilling out of the restaurant behind me. I didn't pick it up. I just stood there, staring at the reflection of city lights trembling in the rainwater pooled around it. Like even the ground beneath me couldn't stay steady. 20 minutes earlier, I had been standing inside that same restaurant, rehearsing how I would say yes, smiling at the thought of forever, believing in something soft and simple and real. And then I saw him. My fiancé. The man I had built my future around. His hand wasn't reaching for mine. It was wrapped around someone else's waist. Her laugh was light, familiar, too comfortable. Like this wasn't new. Like I was the only one who didn't know the script had already changed. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I just watched. Quietly. Like my own life had turned into something I wasn't invited to anymore. When he finally noticed me, there was no panic in his eyes. No guilt. Just irritation. Like I had shown up at the wrong time. Like I was the inconvenience. It's not what it looks like, he said, but even he didn't sound convinced. I nodded anyway. Not because I believed him, but because I suddenly understood something I hadn't before. I had been holding on to a version of him that didn't exist anymore. Maybe never did. The rain started falling harder as I stepped back onto the sidewalk, each drop hitting my skin like a quiet wake-up call. Cars passed. People rushed by with umbrellas and places to be. And I stood there with nothing but a dress that suddenly felt too thin and a future that had just disappeared in under 60 seconds. That's when the ring fell. Not thrown. Not dramatic. Just released. Like my hand finally understood what my heart hadn't caught up to yet. I should have picked it up. I should have done something. But I didn't move. Because in that moment, I realized I wasn't just losing him. I was losing the version of myself who thought love meant waiting. Forgiving. Staying. I exhaled slowly, watching the rain distort everything around me. And for the first time that night, I felt something unexpected. Not sadness. Not anger. Just empty. Clean. Like a blank page I didn't ask for, but couldn't avoid. And then, from somewhere behind me, I heard it. A car door opening. Slow. Deliberate. The kind of sound that didn't belong to coincidence. I didn't turn right away. I didn't need to. Because somehow, I already knew. Whatever was about to happen next wasn't going to ask for my permission. I turned slowly, not because I was curious, but because something in the air had shifted, like the city itself had paused for half a second, waiting to see what I would do next. The car was black. Not just any black, but the kind that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Parked too perfectly along the curb, engine still running, as if it had been there longer than I realized. The door remained open. No one rushed me. No voice called out. No explanation offered. Just an invitation that did not feel optional. I wrapped my arms around myself, more out of instinct than cold, and took one step closer. Then another. The closer I got, the more I noticed the details. The quiet. The absence of chaos around it. People passed by, but they did not look directly at the car. Like their instincts told them not to. Like whatever this was did not belong to their world. And maybe it did not belong to mine either. Not anymore. I stopped just a few feet away, my reflection faintly visible in the tinted window. I looked different. Not physically, but something behind my eyes had changed. Something had shut off. The door on the other side opened. This time, I did not miss it. A man stepped out, tall enough that the city lights seemed to frame him instead of touch him. His suit was dark, perfectly tailored, every line sharp without trying too hard. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. He simply moved, like time adjusted to match his pace. When his eyes found mine, I felt it. Not fear. Not exactly. Something more precise. Like being seen in a way that was too accurate to ignore. Sophie Bennett, he said, my name landing between us like it had always belonged to him. My breath caught, not because he knew it, but because of how easily he said it. Like it was not information. Like it was a fact he had already accepted. You are standing in the rain, he added, glancing briefly at the sky before looking back at me. And you are no longer expected anywhere else tonight. It was not a question. I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. Do I know you? He tilted his head slightly, as if considering the answer more carefully than necessary. No, he said, but I know enough. The way he said it should have unsettled me more than it did. But I was too tired to feel threatened. Too empty to feel cautious. Then why are you here? I asked. His gaze did not waver. Because you just lost something, he said. And I am offering you something else. A car passed behind me, headlights cutting briefly across his face, revealing sharp features and eyes that held no confusion. No hesitation. Just certainty. Get in, he said quietly. Not louder. Not harsher. Just final. I should have walked away. I should have asked more questions. I should have cared about consequences. Instead, I looked back once. Just once. At the restaurant. At the life I had almost chosen. And for the first time, it felt small. Replaceable. Like it had already moved on without me. I turned back to him. And without fully understanding why, I stepped forward. The door closed behind me with a soft, controlled sound that felt louder than it should have, like it marked a line I could not step back across. The world outside disappeared instantly, replaced by quiet. Not the kind of quiet you find in an empty room, but the kind that feels deliberate, designed. The rain was still falling. I could see it through the tinted glass, streaking down in blurred lines. But inside the car, there was nothing. No engine noise. No music. Just my own breathing, uneven and unfamiliar. I sat there for a second, hands resting on my lap, unsure where to look, unsure what came next. Then he entered. The same measured movement. The same unshakable presence. He did not rush to fill the silence. He let it stretch, like he was used to people adjusting themselves around him. When the door shut, it felt final in a way I could not explain. He sat across from me, not too close, not distant either. Just enough space to remind me this was intentional. Everything about this was intentional. You made a fast decision, he said, his voice calm, steady, like he had already accounted for every possible outcome. I let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. So did you. A flicker of something crossed his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Like I had said something worth noting. I do not make decisions without reason, he replied. I looked at him then. Really looked this time. The sharp lines of his face, the controlled way he held himself, the way his eyes never drifted, never softened. There was no uncertainty there. No hesitation. And what is your reason for me? I asked. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket and placed something on the seat between us. A small black card. Thick. Minimal. My name printed on it in clean, precise lettering. Sophie Bennett. My stomach tightened slightly. You have no outstanding obligations, he said. No shared assets. No legal ties that would complicate your situation. I blinked. You investigated me. I confirmed what I needed to know. The way he corrected me made it feel less like an invasion and more like a standard process. Like this was normal in his world. Like I was the one out of place for questioning it. And what exactly do you need? I pressed. His gaze held mine, steady and unyielding. A wife, he said. The word did not sound romantic. It did not sound emotional. It sounded strategic. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the fact that nothing about tonight felt real anymore. You do not even know me, I said quietly. I know enough, he repeated. You do not stay where you are not valued. You do not beg for attention. And you walk away when something is already broken. My chest tightened slightly, not from fear, but from the accuracy of it. He leaned back slightly, giving me space, but not breaking eye contact. This would be immediate, he continued. Simple. Legal. You would not lose anything. Only gain. I should have asked what the cost was. I should have questioned the reality of it. Instead, I found myself asking something else. And what do you gain? For the first time, there was a pause. Not long, but enough to feel different. Certainty, he said. Finally, the words settled between us, heavier than it should have been. I looked down at my hands, still slightly damp from the rain, then back at him. My life had just fallen apart in under an hour. The version of my future I had believed in was gone. And sitting in front of me was something else entirely. Not softer, not safer, but solid. Tonight, I asked. He nodded once. No hesitation. No doubt. I exhaled slowly, feeling something inside me shift again. Not fear. Not excitement. Just acceptance. Okay, I said. Then let us not waste time. And for the first time since I stepped into the rain, his expression changed. Not softer. Not warmer. But certain in a way that felt like everything had just aligned exactly the way he expected. The car did not drive fast, but everything outside blurred anyway, like the city had decided to stop matching the moment I said yes. Streetlights stretched into long golden lines across the window, reflections bending and shifting as we moved through intersections I did not recognize. I did not ask where we were going. He did not offer. The silence between us was not empty. It was structured, like everything else about him. After a few minutes, he reached forward slightly and tapped once on the glass divider. The driver did not speak. He simply adjusted course, smooth and immediate, as if every instruction was already expected before it was given. I watched that small interaction more closely than I should have. The efficiency, the lack of hesitation, the absence of unnecessary words. This was not just control. This was a system. I shifted slightly in my seat, my fingers brushing against the edge of the card he had given me earlier. My name still printed on it. Clean. Certain. Like my identity had already been rewritten in a world I had not yet stepped into. Where are we going? I asked finally. Not because I needed to know, but because the question felt like something I should say. To finalize this, he replied. His tone did not change. There is a courthouse open for private arrangements. I let out a quiet breath. Of course there was. In his world, even time bent differently. Midnight was not a boundary. It was just another hour to use. I glanced down at myself, at the dress I had chosen for a completely different future just hours ago. It suddenly felt like a costume from a life that had already ended. I am not exactly dressed for a wedding, I said, a faint trace of dry humor slipping through before I could stop it. His gaze moved briefly over me, not lingering, not evaluating in the way I was used to. Just noting. You are dressed appropriately, he said. This is not about appearance. Something about that settled differently than I expected. No pressure. No performance. Just function. The car slowed, then stopped. I looked out the window and saw it. A building that did not stand out, yet felt important in a way I could not explain. Clean lines. Quiet entrance. Lights still on, even at this hour. The door was already open before I could reach for it. A man stood there, holding it, his posture straight, his expression neutral. He nodded once to Adrian, then to me, like we were expected. No questions. No surprise. Inside, the air was warmer, still carrying that same deliberate quiet I had started to recognize. We walked down a hallway that seemed too prepared, too ready, as if this moment had been scheduled long before I agreed to it. My heels clicked softly against the polished floor, each step grounding me more than the last. This was real, not emotional, not symbolic. Real. A woman stood at the end of the hall, holding a folder. She gave a polite smile, but her eyes moved quickly, efficiently, assessing nothing, simply confirming. Everything is prepared, she said. Her voice was calm, practiced. Adrian nodded once. Good. No introduction. No explanation. Just confirmation that the next step was already in place. I stopped just short of the door she gestured toward, my hand tightening slightly at my side. This was the moment. The exact line between who I had been and whatever I was about to become. Adrian paused beside me, not touching, not rushing, just present. You can still walk away, he said quietly. Not as a challenge. Not as a warning. Just a fact. I looked at the door, then at him, then back at the door again. The strange thing was, I did not feel trapped. I felt clear. No, I said softly. I am done walking away. And this time, when he looked at me, there was something new. In his expression, not softer, but certain in a different way. Like for the first time tonight, I was not just part of his plan. I was part of his decision. The room was smaller than I expected, almost understated, like it was designed for decisions rather than celebrations. No flowers. No music. Just a polished desk, 2 chairs, and a quiet presence that made everything feel official the moment I stepped inside. The woman who had been waiting for us moved with calm precision, placing the folder on the table and opening it without hesitation. Papers already arranged. Lines already marked. It felt less like preparation and more like inevitability. I stood there for a second longer than necessary, letting the reality settle into something solid. This was not a dream, not a reaction. This was a choice. Adrian stepped forward beside me, not guiding, not pushing, just aligning himself with the moment like he had always been here. Sit, he said quietly. Not a command, not a request, just direction. I lowered myself into the chair, my hands resting lightly against the table as I looked down at the documents in front of me. My name was already printed there. Sophie Bennett. Clean. Undeniable. And beneath it, a space waiting to change everything. You have reviewed the terms? The woman asked, her tone professional, neutral, as if this was just another arrangement in a long line of similar ones. I glanced up briefly, then back down. Not exactly, I admitted. Adrian did not react immediately. He reached forward, turning one page slightly so it aligned better in front of me. There is nothing hidden, he said. No obligations beyond what you choose to accept. I let out a quiet breath, my eyes scanning the words without truly absorbing them. Legal language. Structured. Controlled. But none of it felt as important as the moment itself. And if I change my mind later? I asked, my voice softer now, not uncertain, just honest. There was a brief pause. Not uncomfortable. Just deliberate. Then we will address it when it happens, he said. Not dismissive. Not dismissing the possibility. Just acknowledging it without fear. I nodded slightly, my fingers brushing against the pen placed beside the paper. It was heavier than I expected. Cool against my skin. Real. Everything about this felt real in a way my previous life never quite did. The woman across from us adjusted her posture slightly. Whenever you are ready. No pressure. No urgency. Just time, waiting for me to decide how to use it. I looked at the line again. My name. My future. My past already slipping further away with every second I stayed in this room. I thought about the restaurant. About the ring still sitting somewhere on a wet sidewalk. About the version of me who would have picked it up. And then I looked at Adrian. He had not moved. Had not rushed me. His attention was steady, unwavering, but not demanding. He was not asking me to become something. He was offering me the space to choose it. I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. Not because I was certain of what came next, but because for the first time, uncertainty did not scare me. It felt open. I pressed the pen to paper and signed my name in one smooth motion. Sophie Bennett. The ink settled instantly, dark and final. The woman nodded once, efficient as ever, sliding the document toward Adrian. He did not hesitate. His signature followed mine, precise and controlled, like every other movement he made. When he set the pen down, there was no announcement. No dramatic shift. Just a quiet understanding that something had changed. The woman closed the folder. Congratulations, she said politely, her tone the same as before, but the word carried more weight than anything else in the room. I exhaled slowly, leaning back slightly in my chair as the reality caught up to me. I was married. Not gradually. Not emotionally. Instantly. I turned my head slightly toward Adrian, studying his profile for the first time since the signatures dried. That was it. I asked. He looked at me then, his expression unreadable but steady. That was the beginning, he said. And for reasons I could not explain. I believed him. The hallway felt different on the way out, like the air itself had shifted to recognize something had changed, even if nothing looked different. The same polished floors. The same quiet lighting. The same people moving with calm efficiency. But now, when they glanced at me, there was a subtle pause. A fraction of a second longer than before. Not curiosity. Recognition. I walked beside Adrian, matching his pace without thinking, my heels echoing softly with each step. Mrs. Moretti. The name had not been spoken out loud yet, but I could feel it settling somewhere in the background of everything. Not heavy. Not overwhelming. Just present. The door opened before we reached it, the same man from earlier stepping aside with a respectful nod. This time, his gaze lingered just slightly on me before returning forward. A silent acknowledgement. I stepped outside, and the rain had softened into a fine mist, barely noticeable against my skin. The city was still alive, still moving, but it felt distant now, like I was watching it from behind glass instead of standing inside it. The car was already waiting. Of course it was. Nothing in Adrian's world seemed to rely on chance. He opened the door for me, a simple gesture, controlled and precise. I hesitated for half a second before getting in, not because I was unsure, but because I realized something quietly unsettling. I no longer had a place I was supposed to return to. When the door closed behind me again, the silence returned instantly. Familiar now. Almost grounding. Adrian entered a moment later, taking his seat across from me as if nothing about tonight required adjustment. Where are we going now? I asked, my voice steadier than before. Not empty anymore. Just aware. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied me for a brief moment, as if measuring something that had shifted since the last time he looked. Home, he said finally. The word lingered longer than it should have. Home. I almost smiled at the irony. And where is that? I asked. He leaned back slightly, one hand resting calmly against the seat, his posture unchanged. You will see. Not evasive. Just final. The car began moving again, smooth and controlled, blending back into the rhythm of the city without ever feeling part of it. I looked out the window, watching familiar streets fade into unfamiliar ones, buildings growing taller, quieter, more distant from everything I used to recognize. The further we went, the less noise there was. Fewer people, fewer lights and windows. The city did not disappear. It just stepped aside. After a while, I noticed the subtle change in surroundings. Wider streets, taller gates, houses that were not really houses, but statements. Each one standing apart from the next, like privacy itself was part of the design. The car slowed as we approached one of them. Large gates, black iron, clean lines, nothing excessive, yet impossible to ignore. They opened before we stopped. Of course they did. I watched as we passed through, the world outside closing quietly behind us. The driveway curved slightly, lined with soft lighting that illuminated just enough to guide, never enough to reveal everything at once. The house came into view slowly, not all at once, like it was allowing itself to be seen on its own terms. Modern, expansive. Still, the car came to a stop, and for a moment, neither of us moved. I looked at it, really looked this time, trying to understand what I was stepping into. Not just the building, the life attached to it. Adrian opened his door first, stepping out with the same calm certainty he had carried all night. He walked around, an open mind, offering his hand without saying a word. I looked at it, then at him, then back at his hand again, and slowly, I took it, not because I needed help stepping out of the car, but because something told me this was not about the step. It was about the choice. And as my feet touched the ground, I realized something quietly irreversible. I had not just entered his world. I had chosen to stay in it. The house did not feel like a house when I stepped inside. It felt like a space that had been waiting, not for someone, but for a role to be filled. The doors closed quietly behind us, sealing out the last trace of the city, and for a moment, all I could hear was the faint echo of my own footsteps against the marble floor. Everything was immaculate. Not cold, not sterile, but precise. Every line intentional. Every object placed with a purpose I could not yet understand. I let my eyes move slowly, taking in the high ceilings, the soft lighting that seemed to follow rather than lead, the silence that did not feel empty, just controlled. This is your home now, Adrian said, his voice steady, carrying just enough to anchor me without overwhelming the space. I turned slightly, looking at him, searching for something in his expression that might explain how easily he said that. But there was no hesitation there. No adjustment. Just certainty. It feels quiet, I said, my voice softer than I intended. He nodded once. It is meant to be. The answer settled into me in a way I did not expect. Not defensive. Not explanatory. Just true. A woman appeared from the hallway to our right, her posture straight, her presence calm but alert. She paused a few steps away, her gaze briefly meeting mine before shifting respectfully toward Adrian. Everything is prepared, she said. The same phrase. The same tone. Like this entire world operated on quiet confirmations instead of questions. Adrian gave a slight nod. Good. Then his attention returned to me. You will be shown your room. Your room. Not ours. Not yet. I noticed that. And something in my chest eased slightly. A tension I had not fully acknowledged loosening without permission. The woman gestured gently, her movements smooth and practiced. This way, please. I hesitated for half a second, glancing back at Adrian. He did not move to follow. He simply stood there, watching, not distant, not detached, just allowing. I will see you shortly, he said. Not dismissing me, not sending me away, just giving space. I nodded once and followed her down the hallway, my steps quieter now, more aware of where I was placing myself. The hallway stretched longer than expected, lined with doors that remained closed, each one holding something I was not meant to know yet. We stopped in front of one, and she opened it without hesitation. The room inside was different, softer, warmer. The lighting shifted slightly, less structured, more natural. The bed was large, but not imposing. The colors neutral, calming, nothing overwhelming. It did not feel like a guest room. It felt considered. This has been arranged for you, she said, stepping aside slightly to let me take it in fully. I walked in slowly, my fingers brushing lightly against the edge of a dresser, the surface cool and smooth beneath my touch. Everything was new, untouched, waiting. If you need anything, you only have to ask, she added. I turned to her, studying her expression. There was no curiosity there, no judgment, just quiet professionalism. Thank you, I said, the words coming easier than I expected. She inclined her head slightly and stepped back, leaving the door open as she exited, not closing it behind her. Not trapping, not sealing, just leaving the choice to me. I stood there alone for a moment, the silence settling differently this time. Not unfamiliar, not uncomfortable, just mine. I walked toward the window, looking out at the grounds beyond, the faint lights outlining paths I had not yet walked, a world I had not yet understood. And for the first time since this night began, I did not feel like I was reacting. I felt like I was standing still long enough to see what came next. Behind me, the open door remained untouched, and I realized something quietly, almost unexpectedly. He had not locked me into this life. He had simply opened it. I did not close the door right away. I stood there, halfway between stepping forward and turning back, my hand resting lightly against the edge of the frame, as if the decision mattered more than it should have. The room behind me was quiet. The hallway beyond it was quieter. And somewhere in between, I felt the weight of something unfamiliar. Not pressure, not expectation, just possibility. I let my fingers fall away from the door and walked back into the room slowly, the soft carpet muffling my steps, as if even sound was meant to be controlled here. My reflection caught my attention in the mirror across the room. I stopped, not because I did not recognize myself, but because I did, too clearly. The same dress, the same face. But the girl who had walked into that restaurant earlier felt distant now, like someone I had already outgrown in a single night. I reached up slightly, brushing a strand of hair back into place, more out of habit than need. The silence did not press in on me. It held, waiting. Then there was a knock. Soft, measured, not demanding, just present. I turned toward the door, my heartbeat steady as I crossed the room and opened it. The same woman stood there, composed as before, holding a small tray with a glass of water and something folded neatly beside it. For you, she said simply, stepping forward just enough to place it on the table near the bed. I glanced down. A set of clothes. Soft fabric. Neutral tones. Not extravagant. Just chosen. Thank you, I said again, the words beginning to feel natural instead of automatic. She inclined her head slightly. Mr. Moretti asked that you rest. There is no schedule tonight. No schedule. The phrase lingered longer than expected. No expectations. No instructions. Just time. And him. I asked before I could stop myself. She did not pause. He is working. Of course he was. Something about that grounded the entire situation in a way I could not explain. His world did not stop because of me. It adjusted. Slightly. Precisely. I nodded once, and she stepped back, leaving me alone again with the door still open. I closed it this time. Not because I felt trapped. Because I wanted to. I changed slowly, the soft fabric unfamiliar against my skin, lighter than what I had been wearing, easier to move in. When I sat down on the edge of the bed, I noticed how everything responded to the smallest shift. The mattress adjusting. The light dimming slightly as if it recognized the hour. This place was not just designed. It was aware. I leaned back, staring up at the ceiling, letting my thoughts move without forcing them into order. Married. The word still felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. But the feeling was different. Not overwhelming. Not romantic. Just steady. Like I had stepped into something that did not need to prove itself. My eyes drifted toward the door again. Closed now. Quiet. No footsteps outside. No voices. Just space. And for the first time, I realized something I had not allowed myself to think about yet. He had not come in. He had not followed. He had not tried to define what this meant beyond the moment we signed those papers. He had given me a room, a choice, a pause, and somehow, that felt more powerful than anything else he had done tonight. I closed my eyes slowly, letting the quiet settle fully around me, not as something to fill, but as something to exist within. And just before sleep finally pulled me under, one thought stayed clear, steady, and impossible to ignore. He did not take control of me. He took control of everything around me. and left me free to decide what I would become inside it. I woke up before I realized I had actually fallen asleep. The room was still dim, but no longer dark, the soft light of early morning filtering through the curtains in a way that felt intentional, like even the sunrise had been arranged to be this quiet. For a moment, I did not move. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting my mind catch up to where my body already was. Then it came back. Not all at once. Not overwhelming. Just steady. The papers. The signature. The way his name had followed mine without hesitation. I turned my head slightly, my eyes landing on the door. Still closed. Still undisturbed. No one had come in. No one had checked. No one had needed to. I sat up slowly, the fabric of the clothes I had changed into shifting easily with me. And for the first time, I noticed something small but undeniable. I felt rested. Not just physically, mentally, like something inside me had finally stopped bracing for impact. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood, my bare feet pressing lightly against the floor as I walked toward the window. The view was clearer in the daylight. The ground stretched farther than I expected, clean lines of stone paths cutting through perfectly maintained greenery, everything placed with the same quiet precision I had started to recognize. Nothing felt accidental here. Even the distance between things felt measured. I rested my hand lightly against the glass, watching as someone moved across the far side of the property, their figure small, purposeful, already part of a routine I did not yet understand. This place was alive, just not loudly. A soft knock broke the stillness, gentle enough that it did not startle me, just shifted my attention. I turned, already expecting it this time, and walked to the door, opening it without hesitation. The same woman stood there again, composed as always, but this time there was something slightly different in her expression. Not warmer, just acknowledging. "Good morning, Mrs. Moretti," she said. The words landed differently than anything else had. Not shocking, not dramatic, just real. I held her gaze for a second longer than necessary, letting the name settle into place before I responded. "Good morning," I said quietly. My voice did not waver. She stepped inside briefly, placing another tray on the table, this one holding a cup of coffee, steam rising slowly into the air, along with a neatly folded set of clothes that looked more structured than what I was wearing. "Mr. Moretti has a meeting this morning," she continued. "He asked that you join him for breakfast. When you are ready." Not a command, not an order, an invitation. I glanced at the coffee, then back at her. "Is he always like this?" I asked before I could filter the thought. She paused just slightly, considering the question. "Consistent," she replied. Then she inclined her head and stepped back, leaving me with the door open once again. I closed it gently this time, not because I felt the need to separate myself, but because I was starting to understand something. This space responded to decisions, even small ones. I walked back to the table, wrapping my hands around the warm cup, letting the heat settle into my palms as I took a slow sip. It tasted exactly how it should. Balanced. Intentional. Nothing excessive. Just right. I looked at the clothes beside it, then back toward the window, then down at the cup again. Somewhere between last night and this morning, something had shifted in a way I could not fully explain. I was not trying to figure out how to leave. I was not questioning what I had done. I was preparing. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand what this life looked like when I stepped fully into it. I set the cup down carefully, my reflection catching in the surface of the glass beside me. Same face, same eyes, but steadier now, clearer. And for the first time since everything changed, I asked myself something that did not feel like fear. It felt like direction. If this was my new beginning, then what kind of woman was I going to be inside it? I took my time getting ready, not because I was unsure, but because for the first time in a long time, I did not feel rushed by anything outside of me. The clothes laid out for me fit perfectly, like they had been chosen with precision rather than guesswork, structured but comfortable, something that felt like a quiet step into a different version of myself. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see someone pretending. I saw someone adjusting, learning how to stand in a space that did not shrink her. I left the room without hesitation, the hallway already familiar in a way that surprised me, like my mind had accepted this place faster than I had expected. The house was more active now. Subtle movement in the background, people passing quietly, each step measured, each action purposeful. No one stopped me. No one questioned me. But I could feel it. The awareness. The recognition. Not intrusive. Just present. I followed the scent of coffee and something warm until the space opened into a dining area that felt less like a room and more like a continuation of everything else. Clean lines. Natural light. A table set without excess, just enough to serve its purpose without distraction. He was already there, seated at the far end, one hand resting near a cup of coffee, the other holding a phone that he set aside the moment I stepped into the room. His attention shifted to me completely. Not scanning. Not assessing. Just focused. "Good morning," he said. The same calm tone. The same steady presence. But this time, it felt different. I stepped closer, my heels soft against the floor, and took the seat across from him. "Good morning," I replied, matching his tone without trying. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, because nothing needed to be forced. A plate was placed in front of me quietly, the movement seamless, almost invisible, and I glanced down briefly before looking back up at him. "You sleep well?" he asked. The question was simple, but it carried something underneath it. Not obligation. Not politeness. Just attention. "I did," I said honestly. "Better than I expected." He gave a slight nod, like that answer mattered more than he would say out loud. "Good." The words settled, not as approval, but as confirmation. I picked up my fork, taking a small bite, more aware of the moment than the food itself. Everything tasted balanced. Intentional. Nothing overwhelming. Just right. "You have a meeting," I said, breaking the quiet this time. He watched me for a brief second, then nodded. "Yes." No elaboration. No unnecessary detail. "And you still asked me to join you?" I continued. "Of course." The answer came without hesitation. I tilted my head slightly. "Why?" There was a pause. Not long, but real. He leaned back slightly, his gaze steady, considering not the question itself, but how much of the answer to give. "Because you are not separate from my time," he said finally. "You are part of it now." The words did not feel possessive. They felt structured, like a fact he had already built his world around. I held his gaze, letting that settle before responding. "And if I do not want to be scheduled into it?" He did not react immediately. Instead, he reached for his cup, taking a slow sip before placing it back down with the same controlled precision. "Then you will not be," he said. "But you will still be considered." That was different. Not control. Not expectation. Just inclusion without pressure. I looked down briefly, then back at him, something in my chest shifting in a way I could not ignore. "You make this sound very simple," I said. "It is not simple," he replied. "It is clear." The distinction stayed with me longer than anything else he had said. Clear. Not easy. Not effortless. Just defined. And as I sat there across from him, in a life I had stepped into without preparation, I realized something quietly grounding. He was not trying to shape me into something. He was creating a space where I could decide that for myself. And somehow, that made everything feel more real than anything I had left behind. The moment ended quietly, not with a conclusion, but with a shift. He stood first, not abruptly, just decisively. The movement smooth enough that it felt like part of the rhythm of the room rather than a disruption. "I will be gone for a few hours," he said, adjusting his jacket with the same precise attention he gave everything else. "You are free to use the house as you wish." Free. The word stayed with me longer than expected. Not because it was surprising, because of how easily he said it. Like it was not something he granted. It was something he assumed I already had. I nodded once, setting my fork down, watching as he stepped away from the table without waiting for a response. Not dismissive, just trusting the moment to stand on its own. He paused briefly near the doorway, turning just enough to look back at me. "If you need anything," he added, "you will be provided for." Then he left. No hesitation. No lingering. Just gone, like the space adjusted around his absence as naturally as it had around his presence. I sat there for a few seconds longer, the quiet settling differently this time. Not filled by him. Not shaped by him. Just mine again. I stood slowly, pushing my chair back with a soft sound that seemed louder now without the conversation to balance it. The house felt different when I moved through it alone. Not empty. Not cold. Just open. Like it was waiting to see how I would exist inside it without direction. I walked down the hallway without a clear destination, my steps slower, more observant, letting my eyes take in details I had not noticed before. The way the light shifted depending on where I stood. The subtle placement of artwork that did not demand attention, but held it anyway. Everything here had intention, even the silence. I paused near a window that overlooked a different part of the property, my reflection faint against the glass as I watched the outside world move at its own pace. And then, without warning, something else moved into focus. A car. Not unfamiliar. Not out of place in any other setting. But here, it felt different. It stopped just beyond the gates, not entering, not leaving, just waiting. My hands stilled against the glass, my attention narrowing slightly as I tried to understand what I was looking at. The gates did not open immediately. There was a delay. Small. Controlled. Then they did. The car moved forward slowly, deliberate, like it knew exactly where it was supposed to go. I did not recognize it. But something in my chest tightened anyway. Not fear. Recognition. Not of the car. Of the feeling. The kind that comes before something shifts again. I stepped back slightly, my gaze following as the car came closer, stopping near the front entrance with the same quiet precision everything else seemed to have here. The engine turned off. The door opened. And even from this distance, I could see it. The hesitation. The way the person stepping out paused for half a second longer than necessary, like they were not sure they were supposed to be here. My breath slowed, my mind already connecting pieces before I fully understood them. I did not need to see his face clearly. I already knew. Some things do not need confirmation. They just return. And as I stood there, watching the past step into a place that did not belong to it anymore, I realized something quietly, almost calmly. This life I had stepped into was not separate from who I used to be. It was going to test it. And this time, I was not the same person who had walked away in the rain. I did not rush to the door. I did not run down the hallway or call out his name. Instead, I stood there for one more second, letting the feeling settle fully into place, steady and controlled, like everything else in this house. Then I turned and walked. Not fast, not hesitant, just certain. Each step down the hallway echoed softly, but this time, the sound did not make me feel like an outsider. It felt like I belonged in the space I was moving through. By the time I reached the entrance, the door was already open. Of course it was. Nothing here waited for uncertainty. He stood just inside, not stepping further in, not fully retreating either. The same posture I remembered. The same face I had once trusted without question. But something about him felt smaller now. Not physically, just less certain in a way I had never noticed before. Sophie, he said, my name leaving his mouth like it still belonged to him. I stopped a few feet away, the distance between us precise, intentional. You should not be here. I replied, my voice calm, not raised, not shaking, just clear. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair in a gesture I used to recognize as frustration, but now it looked more like discomfort. I needed to talk to you, he said. You left without saying anything. I held his gaze, not looking away, not stepping closer. I think everything was already said, I answered. There was a pause. Not long, but heavy enough to shift the air between us. He glanced around briefly, taking in the space behind me, the scale of it, the quiet control that defined everything here. His expression tightened slightly. What is this place? He asked. I did not turn to look. I did not need to. My home, I said simply. The word landed differently this time. Not uncertain. Not borrowed. Mine. He let out a short breath, something between disbelief and irritation. You are serious right now? He said. You walk out on me, and then just what? Move in here. His voice was not loud, but it carried something familiar. The need to pull control back into his hands. I noticed it immediately, and for the first time, it did not affect me. I did not walk out on you, I said evenly. You made your choice before I ever had the chance to make mine. He stepped forward slightly, closing part of the distance, but I did not move. That was a mistake, he said quickly. You know that was not real. That was not us. I tilted my head just slightly, studying him in a way I never had before. Not emotionally. Objectively. It was real enough, I said. You just did not think I would see it. The silence that followed was different. Not uncertain. Not emotional. Just final. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else, but nothing came out immediately. And in that space, I realized something quietly powerful. He was no longer leading this conversation. I was. You should go, I said. Not harsh. Not cold. Just decided. His expression shifted again, something sharper this time. Something that used to make me hesitate, second guess, stay longer than I should have. But now it passed over me without landing. So that is it, he asked. You are just done? I met his eyes fully, steady and unflinching. No, I said softly. I am just not waiting anymore. The words settled between us, heavier than anything else that had been said. He stood there for a moment longer, like he was trying to find something to hold on to, something to pull me back into a version of the past that no longer existed. But there was nothing left. Not here. Not anymore. Finally, he stepped back. Not dramatically. Not defeated. Just aware. The door remained open behind him. The space beyond it unchanged, ordinary, familiar. And for the first time, I saw it clearly for what it was. A place I had already outgrown. He hesitated once more, like he expected me to stop him, to say something, to reach for what we used to have. I did not. I just stood there, still, certain. And then he left. The door closed quietly, sealing the moment without needing to emphasize it. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders relaxing in a way I had not noticed they were tense before. No relief, no regret, just clarity. And as I turned back toward the house, toward the life I had chosen instead of the one I had been given, I understood something in a way I never had before. I had not been replaced. I had replaced the version of myself that would have stayed. The house felt quieter after he left, not because there was less sound, but because something had settled into place that no longer needed tension to exist. I did not rush away from the entrance. I did not fill the silence with movement. I simply stood there for a moment longer, letting the stillness confirm what I already knew. Then I turned, walking back inside with the same steady pace I had learned to carry since the night everything changed. This time, the space did not feel unfamiliar. It felt aligned, as if I had finally stepped into it fully instead of just passing through. I moved through the hallway without thinking, my reflection catching briefly in the polished surfaces around me, not as something to question, but as something I recognized without hesitation. When I reached the dining room again, it was empty. His seat untouched since he left. The cup still there, exactly where he had placed it. Nothing out of place. Nothing rushed. Just paused. I walked over slowly, my fingers brushing lightly against the back of the chair before I stepped past it, looking out through the large windows that framed the world beyond in quiet precision. The gates were closed again. The car that had brought the past here was gone. And with it, the last trace of anything that had once held me in place. I exhaled slowly, not as relief, not as release, but as something deeper. Acceptance. Behind me, I heard it. Footsteps. Not hurried. Not loud. Just present. I did not turn immediately. I did not need to. I had already learned the rhythm. He is gone, Adrian said. Not a question. Not a check. A statement. I turned then, meeting his gaze fully. No hesitation, no distance. Yes, I replied. He studied me for a brief moment, his eyes moving not to assess, but to understand. And you? He asked. The question was simple, but it carried everything. I held his gaze, letting the answer form without rushing it. I am here, I said. Not just physically, not just in the room. Here, present, chosen. Something shifted in his expression then. Not softer, not dramatic, just certain in a way that felt different from before. He stepped closer, stopping just within reach, not crossing the space I had not given him permission to cross. Good, he said quietly. I felt the words settle, not as approval, but as acknowledgement. Then, after a brief pause, I asked the question that had been waiting beneath everything else. Why me? The silence that followed was not empty. It was deliberate. He did not answer immediately. He looked at me, not past me, not through me, but directly at me, as if the answer required precision. Because you did not stay where you were not valued, he said. And you did not ask to be chosen. The words landed deeper than I expected. Not because they were complicated, because they were exact. He took one more step closer, still controlled, still measured, but this time, intentional in a different way. You chose, he added, even when you had nothing left to hold on to. I felt something shift in my chest, not fragile, not uncertain, just real. I nodded slightly, not because I needed to agree, but because I understood. And in that moment, standing there in a life I had not planned, with a man who had not asked for permission to enter it, I realized something that did not need explanation. He did not rescue me. He did not take me. He met me at the exact moment I chose myself. And somehow, that changed everything.